You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Incoming transmission.
You're listening to the Hollownet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You're listening to the Hollownet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Oh, we got a great show today. We're going to be talking about the FISA court documents just released. And we also have to address a couple of questions. What in the world is wrong with millennials? So I listened to the audience. You guys said I needed to get on with the show, so, well, I took your advice and...
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
All right, geez, here we go.
You're listening to the Hollownet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Yes, indeed, that is right. The new Millennial Resistance does indeed begin right here, right now with you. You're listening to the Hollownet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Today is Sunday in July, the 22nd year of our Lord 2018. And a couple of new pieces of news just coming out. It looks like, God help us, according to the New York Times, the Carter Page FISA documents have been released by the Department of Justice. Let's break it down. The Trump administration disclosed on Saturday previously top-secret set of documents related to the wiretapping of Carter Page, the one-time Trump campaign advisor, who is at the center of highly contentious accusations by Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee that the FBI had abused its own surveillance powers. Read the documents here. I'm going to have those linked to you here at the Hollownet on Facebook.com/Hollownet. Also, tweet us at the Hollownet, Hollownet.com, and Hollownet.lanterns.buzz. If you can take a look at this, redacted seems to be the word of the day. Good Lord. Classified by, we don't know. Derived from, we don't know. Declassified on, I don't know. Identity of the target application is Carter W. Page, a U.S. person, and an agent of a foreign power, as described below. Status of the target was determined in or about October 16 from information provided by the U.S. Department of State, which is redacted. The United States relies upon the following facts and circumstances. The target of the application is an agent of a foreign power. The following describes the foreign power and sets forth in detailed description of the target. The government of the Russian Federation is a foreign power. They are intentionally recognized foreign government, and the clandestine agent activities of the Russian Federation, whole page redacted, another whole page redacted. Carter W. Page, redacted, knowingly engaging clandestine activities other than intelligence gathering for or on behalf of such foreign power. Folks, this is useless. Useless! You want to talk about a token move by the DOJ to just go, okay, get off us. Here's the heavily redacted document, which tells you absolutely nothing and gives you absolutely none of the justifications of why we felt it appropriate to wiretap an American citizen. Because we're just normal plebs, you know? We don't deserve to know why the American government can basically hack the ever-loving hell out of us, except when we're on the wrong side of a political contention. Ooh. So anyway, Democrats in February rejected Republican claims that law enforcement officials had improperly obtained a warrant to monitor Mr. Page, accusing them of putting out misinformation to defend President Trump, and sow doubts about the origin of the Russia investigation. But even as Republicans and Democrats issued dueling memos characterizing the materials underlying the surveillance of Mr. Page, the public had no access to the records. And for the record, New York Times still don't. Still do not have access to those records. You saw it yourself. I'll flash it up on the screen again for the people following here on Facebook Live. The part where you would justify why Carter Page is working for a foreign government, or how, totally redacted. Completely redacted. This is totally useless. There is no justification released here. It's all redacted. Look at all these black sections. Look at it. Just blacked out. This is insulting. This is a slap in the face to anybody who's ever done a Freedom of Information Act. It's ridiculous. Anyway, back to the New York Times write-up, if you can call it that. On Saturday evening, those materials, an October 2016 application to the Foreign Intelligence Service Court, Intelligence Surveillance Court to wiretap Mr. Page, along with several renewal applications, were released to the New York Times and other news organizations that have filed the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit to obtain them. Mr. Trump declassified their existence. The application targets Carter Page, the document said. The FBI believes Page has been subject to targeted recruitment by the Russian government. A line was then redacted, and then it picked up with undermine and influence the outcome of the 2016 presidential election in violation of U.S. criminal law. Mr. Page is a former foreign policy advisor to a candidate for the U.S. president. And this is supposed to be bombshell reporting by New York Times? Sorry, Charlie. Charlie Savage. Bombshell reporting here. They gave you absolutely all. They gave you nothing. But, this whole clickbaity article here, this is just the New York Times breaking it down.
Oh, I like money. Yeah. I like money, though. I like money. I like money.
I like money.
Can't believe you like money, too.
So everybody who thought this was going to be a great big release and this is going to be a bombshell and you're going to hear all the talking heads screaming about it and all the politicians going on and on about how the documents related to the Carter Page investigation were released. Remember, they're referring to this gutted document that tells us absolutely nothing. Don't be fooled, folks. This is the very nature, the very definition of a MacGuffin. A MacGuffin is a nothing item that is just used to move along the plot. This document is a MacGuffin. So moving right along to something slightly more relevant. Lindsey Graham. Good old buddy, Lindsey Graham, coming right out based on this document, maybe he saw the unredacted version, I don't know, says the Carter Page wiretap is not at all justified. Senator Lindsey Graham on Sunday called the government surveillance of former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page not at all justified, backing up President Donald Trump in his criticism of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court-approved wiretaps. Appearing on Face the Nation, the South Carolina Republican said the whole FISA warrant process needs to be looked at. We have a winner. He called the Christopher Steele dossier, which, by the way, was a DNC-funded hack job. Excuse me. Was I supposed to be kidding about that? No. Anyway, he calls the Christopher Steele dossier that the FBI cited in its FISA warrant applications a bunch of garbage, which it objectively is, and criticized the government for not being clear that the dossier's research had been partially, completely funded by the Democrats. Page, who worked on Trump's presidential campaign on foreign policy, was under government suspicion for his ties to Russia. Documents released Saturday showed that the FBI had been worried that Russia wanted to recruit him. Trump has slammed the wiretap approval process alongside his criticism of the ongoing special counsel investigation into Russian electoral meddling and possible Trump campaign collusion. Now, if you take last week's just runaway Trump derangement syndrome effect, as I believe it was The Guardian that called it. Let me see here. Was that the Grani ad that pulled that one out, or was that the Telegraph? Anyway, it was an interesting story. I think it was The Guardian. I've got it here. I've got it in front of me. I had it open moments ago. It was such crap. I didn't want to read it. But it did for you, because I do this all for you. Anyway, what The Guardian just... Oh, that's a terrible picture of Joanne. Roseanne, rather. Sorry, any women named Joanne who I unintentionally burned there. Anyway, The Guardian had a rather good opinion piece on there, which was actually kind of funny, saying that Trump derangement syndrome reached a full head in this past week, and it's completely accurate. I mean, any other president who sat down with Vladimir Putin and carried on and cajoled the way that President Trump did, admittedly making a couple of gaffes along the way, would have been called a statesman, would have been called a diplomat, okay? But the president is called a traitor in this instance when he sits down and he makes nice with the chief Russian politician and former KGB colonel. So, you really have to ask, has the press forgotten how we play the game? Because here is how we have always played the game. The game is that you use your clandestine forces, your intelligence community, for all they're worth, and you spy and you steal and you engage in subterfuge and you get the one-up on your opposition, and then you sit down at the negotiating table and you make nice for the cameras. And that's exactly what President Trump did with Vladimir Putin this past week. Sat down, put on a smile, and he made nice for the cameras. And followed all the normal diplomatic niceties that he's supposed to. And I want to present to you that the Putin conference, the Helsinki conference, was a Kobayashi Maru scenario for the president. Kobayashi Maru, for the science fiction uninitiated, is a simulation from Star Trek. It is called the no-win scenario because you are designed to fail it. It is intentionally designed so you must fail. It is designed to test a captain's courage, and Captain Kirk is very notable in that because he doesn't believe in the no-win scenario, hacked the computers, and won it anyway. President Trump, not so lucky in this case. This conference, this summit, if the president came across full-bore aggressive mode against Vladimir Putin, the press would decry him as a warmonger, saying that he was risking the security of the United States in order to present a strong front against Vladimir Putin and diffuse suspicions of his collusion with Russia. He plays it nice, he gets branded a traitor. Think about it. Put yourself in the mindset of the American press. If we could jump back in a time machine, go back a week, and have President Trump just mount the exact opposite strategy going into the Helsinki conference, would the result have been any different? No. It wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. The press would be on his back today, just with a different headline. Instead of Trump treason, it would be there as a madman at the wheel, and President Trump is trying to get us into World War III. Mark my words and mark them well. This was a designed fall. This could not have been better orchestrated if there were a team of engineers looking to implode the building and leave nary a blade of grass harmed in the next lot. This was a surgical political strike. And the president was doomed to fail in the eyes of the mainstream media. And what will the result be? Merely time will tell. Vladimir Putin has now been invited back to the White House for another conference to follow through and continue the dialogue, as is normal in the political world, kids. But not with this president. With this president, there can be no normal. The press has decreed it. There will be no normalization of a Trump presidency, and every headline must be a crisis. We must be in a constant state of constitutional emergency under this presidency. Otherwise, their narrative is destroyed. Because when you stop to take a look at things, and you realize, and this comes from a conversation with a few fellow millennial friends this past weekend, that for the first time, we have actually had a tangible benefit, a moment of relief, and it came from this president's administration. It came from the tax cut. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my paycheck go up and my taxes go down. For the first time, we felt that there might be some hope of the American government doing something for us, for the working men and women of the United States. And when you see the numbers that I went over yesterday, you're going to see that too. We talk about that next. How inflation has doomed the Democratic Party. All that and more coming up here on the Hollownet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around. Got a hell of a show for you. Hang in there, folks. We're going.
I see people coming together not for divisiveness of party or for dichotomy of thought, but for unity in principle. And the principles that founded our nation, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, ladies and gentlemen, those principles are under the sternest attack that we have seen in many generations. It has become a crime in this nation nearly to express a difference in opinion from what is held by your party to be doctrine, from what is purported by the media to be truth. We have an opportunity to reach out to our fellow Americans regardless of their creed and regardless of their political inclinations, and unite as Americans, not as Republicans or as Democrats, as liberals or conservatives, but to unite around the principles that have guided this nation so well. I've covered a lot of stories, but the story that remains untold is the story of America in the 21st century, when we choose to turn back the tide against progressive socialism, when we choose to embrace the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, when we remember what it is to be Americans. And that principle will not die as long as there is one man, one woman, one child who looks defiantly into the night and says, I am free.
You're listening to the Hollownet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the Hollownet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Watch us on Facebook.com/Hollownet. Follow at The Hollownet on Twitter. Go to www.thehollownet.com and listen on thehollownet.lanterns.buzz. We are on iTunes, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, BitChute, and pretty much everywhere else you can get a podcast in the world, Podcast Addict being among them. iHeartMedia, love being on the iHeartRadio application. Find us there. Now, quick breakdown on some numbers, as I promised before the break. I'm going to take you to the CPI inflation calculator on in2013dollars.com. This is actually a pretty good source on inflation. U.S. inflation, $100 in 1986 to 2018. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index, the dollar experienced an average inflation rate of 2.64% per year. Prices in 2018 are 129.92% higher than prices in 1986. In other words, $100 in 1986 is equivalent to the purchasing power of $229.92 in 2018, a difference of $129.92 in 32 years. Current inflation rate is now 2.87%. If the number holds, $100 today will be equivalent to $102 next year. So that is the difference we're looking at, folks. The cumulative price change due to inflation and price differences is 129.92%. And $100, the year I was born, 1986, is worth $229 today. Now, for most people, myself included, the bellwethers for inflation are fuel, milk, and I also use meat as one of the really good bellwethers of exactly how boned the economy is at any given time. And right now, gas, when I grew up, was like 85 cents a gallon. We're at like just shy of $3 here in the Phoenix market. Milk is almost gold, apparently. It's $2.50 typically on average for a gallon. And meat is just insanely priced. I listened to my fellow Lanterneers, the Defenders of American Exceptionalism, the other day, Dylan and Steven. By the way, you can now check them out on Mojo 50. And I also think they're also on Talk Nation or Talk America, whatever it is. But anyway, Defenders of American Exceptionalism, you can find them on doaeshow.com. Also, they touched on this topic of how irrationally expensive meat has become. So it's very, very strange to me how this has suddenly become a thing. You know, it's highly unusual. So let's try to break this down. We're at 129% inflation. What do you think wages have done in the same time? So we're going to go to Fred, which is the U.S. real median household income, 1984 to 2016. This is the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. This is public domain imagery. Shows that in 1986, the average income was about $52,000, and in 2016, we are up to about $59,000. So you got about a $7,000 difference in earning power here in the United States, and a $229 increase. I'm sorry, a 129.92% increase in average costs due to inflation. This is why so many millennials now think that this woman here is starting to sound intelligent. Why the message of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is beginning to resonate. Because people are seeing this as a failure of capitalism. But once you realize that this nation has not truly enjoyed capitalism since the early 1900s and the progressives started to get their way, it doesn't make any sense. How can we possibly have a demonstrable issue with capitalism when this generation has never truly known it? It doesn't make any matter of sense. And that's what we have to fight for. That's what we have to continually tell people. That no, this is not a question of whether or not capitalism works. It's a question of whether you've ever even experienced capitalism. Go to the story from The Blaze. She doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. Some Dems resent Ocasio-Cortez's approach. Since Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went from a little-known underdog to a national celebrity With the primary upset of Representative Joseph Crowley, some House Democrats have been rubbed the wrong way with her words and methods, The Hill reported. Ocasio-Cortez, a 28-year-old self-proclaimed Democratic socialist who's favored to win her district in November, is being cautioned by House members to pull back some and take care to nurture relationships if she wants political success. With people saying that meteors fizz out. Rep. Halsey Hastings from Florida said, "What she will learn in this institution is that it's glacial to begin with, and therefore no matter how far you rise, that's just how far you will ultimately get your comeuppance. You come here and you're going to be buddy-buddy with all the folks that you're just going to make them do certain things. Ain't happening, okay?" I do have to point out Halsey Hastings' poor grammar there. But the controversy began not long before her primary. Revelation that Crowley could end up on the ballot as a third-party choice by way of New York election law set her off on Twitter. So, what we have to look at, what we have to pay very careful attention to, is how the inflation and the change in costs is changing the opinions of millennials. Because it is quite a serious issue. If people have lost faith in the entire system, in the entire concept of capitalism, then we're going to have a harder road forward. As this Trump derangement syndrome continues, and the press continues to build a mountain out of every possible molehill, then we are going to continue to see this flawed episode recur. Democrats are going to continue to lose seats to their more socialist counterparts, and it's going to behoove them to move to the left. As the Overton window continues to creep, it will become more and more evident with each passing election that there are no longer any good choices. So we have to be very adept and very careful. And we have to realize that, yes, there is a problem. Inflation is the killer. And how do you reverse inflation? You drastically cut back government spending. And that is the fire to which we must hold all of our conservative members of Congress, everyone seeking to get elected this next go-around. You have to hold their feet to the fire, because the tax cut that went through in this past year was just one piece of the equation. The other piece is to drastically reduce the size of the government, pare down the bureaucracy, eliminate redundancies, and get this country off of an entitlement mentality. Because it is very, very true that there is a mental divide between baby boomers, between Gen Xers, and between millennials. I made a post on Twitter last week that garnered me a little bit of blowback. It was a tweet referencing the price of college, and was taken by some as my degrading the entire concept of higher education, which couldn't necessarily be the case. I posted an image of Syndrome, the super villain from The Incredibles, saying, "When everyone has a bachelor's degree, no one does." And next to it, a job posting, which calls for a salary of $12 an hour plus bonus, and requires a bachelor's degree, with the implication that so many people have gone off and gotten themselves 4 years bachelor's degrees that now it is kind of accepted as the standard of entry. So we have people who have taken on $40,000, $80,000 in student loans who are now competing for $12 an hour gigs. People are blaming capitalism on this. And people are kicking back to me that, oh, we should just abjure and push away all concept of higher education. Not the case, folks. What I'm pointing to is a symptom of the larger problem. What I'm pointing to is that millennials, my own generation, were told for 15, 20 years as we were coming through elementary school and high school that you had to take college prep courses because you had to go to college, and if you did these things, you would be able to land a good, high-paying job, and then you would be on easy street for the rest of your life. That is the concept, that is the bill of goods that was sold to the millennials throughout our education. That the bachelor's degree was the key to the door of success. On the other hand, industrial education programs were slashed, eliminated. Vocational learning was moved from the high school to VOTEC schools, where in Jersey at least, and, not degrading our vocational institutions, some of them are great, but the line was, you go to Vokes, you learn to smokes. Because that's where people seemingly went when they couldn't hack it in college prep courses, and it was seen as possibly a source of shame that you went to VOTEC. That's where the bad kids went. Hence the reference to smoking. But now, coming into 2018, 2020, we're going to see a massive shortage of mechanics, of HVAC technicians, duct workers, electricians. Cable running is an issue. Finding somebody who's really good at running cable. Any manner of blue-collar labor field. You are seeing a shortage, and these are good, high-paying jobs. Plumbers, septic system engineers. These are good, high-paying jobs. Mike Rowe has been decrying this for like a decade now. Yet you have people with bachelor degrees flipping burgers. And McDonald's is even getting rid of them. Going to the kiosk system now. So this is a product of the U.S. Department of Education. That's why I leveled this criticism at them. This is the culture that has been built. And the blowback is going to be hard. And right now that blowback is named Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez and the rise of the new socialists in the United States. Because millennials are angry. Take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a few ways to solve this issue. A few ways we can change our thinking and evolve our concept of what is conservative, what is liberal. And perhaps find the Constitution in the middle. You're listening to the Hollownet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
I'm Dr. Bob Branch, Republican candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction. Let me ask you a simple question. If you needed surgery, would you call a politician? Of course not. That wouldn't make any sense. Just like it doesn't make any sense to elect politicians to run Arizona's education system. Yet, we have been electing politicians to run Arizona's education system for decades. And the results? They're painfully clear. We have a failed education system. Politicians brought us mandates like Common Core and No Child Left Behind, and that crazy AZ merit test that keep our teachers from teaching and our students from succeeding. I say it's time to break this cycle. I say it's time to elect an educator, not a legislator, to run and fix our education system. I am Dr. Bob Branch, and you have an option to elect a true educator, a proven leader, a business leader, and a veteran instead of the typical politician. In education, I'm the most accomplished candidate to run for this office in generations. Dean of Education, Dean of Technology, Campus Director, and I'm currently the lead faculty and the content chairman for the largest doctorate program in the world in information system technology. I teach at the #1 and #2 Christian universities in the world, Grand Canyon University and Liberty University. I am the educator of educators, for I have taught many of our superintendents and principals and thousands of teachers at the doctorate level. And as the educator of educators, I stand with President Trump to dismantle the United States Department of Education and to end federal mandates. For if we are to keep America great, we have to educate. And if we let our teachers teach, our students will succeed. Elect the educator of educators, not a legislator, to run and fix our state's education system. I am Dr. Bob Branch, candidate for Superintendent of Public Instruction, and together, let's make education great again. Hi, I'm Dr.
You're listening to the Hollownet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the new Millennial Conservative Resistance does indeed begin right here, right now with you. You just heard a quick message from Dr. Bob Branch, who's running for Superintendent of Public Instruction here in the state of Arizona. Bob Branch, an old friend of the program. I've greatly enjoyed a lot of conversations that I've had with Bob Branch. Found him to be quite the remarkable man, veteran. I believe he served in the Marine Corps here in the United States, and is also a highly learned man. As illustrated by his ad. If you are in Arizona and you are wondering who you should look into for that rather contentious election here in the state of Arizona coming up, I would recommend that you take a look at Dr. Bob Branch. So, coming back to it, how do we get ourselves out of this hole? How do we get ourselves out of this place where millennials are now turning to socialism? First, we have to acknowledge there actually is a problem. Centrist Democrats have begin arguing against the far-left agenda. It appears that on the left, we go to the Miami Herald, even the Democrats are starting to see the problem. They're arguing against a far-left agenda as a 2020 play. Why? We talked about it before, but this is the Democratic Party jumping the shark, and they know it. They realize that if they run left, if they run hard left in 2020, there is going to be such a recoil from the Democratic Party, as it will not be a prominent political force in the United States. It will be reduced to a regional party by 2024. As it stands even today, there is no one candidate who can stand against President Donald Trump and realistically expect to capture the imagination of the voters. There has been a lot of buzz that Bernie Sanders may be returning for another bout in 2020. However, we have to face facts. The Democratic Party still does not want Bernie. Still to this day. Can a man like Bernie Sanders realistically run as a Democratic candidate for President of the United States? He proved he can make it to a primary. He hasn't proved he can make it through a primary. Although his recent outings with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would suggest he is seeking to reinvigorate his base, and is now defining his platform around opposition to President Trump. And as many of my colleagues have said, hating Trump is not a platform. They have nothing else at this point. They have nothing else to go on. And, you know, I've been doing a lot of listening to my colleagues over the sea. I know we've talked about London quite a bit over the course of the past couple of shows. But I want you to pay very close attention to what's happening in British politics right now, as we are seeing the rebirth of the UK Independence Party. The rebirth of UKIP is at hand. And both the Conservatives and the Liberals have no idea what to do about it there. This is what we need here in the United States. So I have now set out to determine what is the American UKIP. What is the American equivalent to this rush to the UK Independence Party that is followed when the realization was made ultra clear through the Count Dankula trial and through the Laura Southern banning, that neither the conservatives in power nor the labor rights have any interest in defending freedom of speech. In the United States, freedom of speech today is not under assault by the government, yet. It's under assault by the private sector. We are being publicly shamed for expressing our opinions. Look no further than CRTV's Louder with Crowder, who recently began a new series called Crowder Confronts, where basically he goes out and confronts people that threaten him and his team live on video. They go and confront them and ask them to take down that threatening post or that threatening tweet and publicly shame them for this. This is not the private sector trying to oppress freedom of speech. This is a conservative host trying to get people on the left to distance themselves from violence. The blocking of free speech is what precedes this. The blocking of free speech is when he goes out and has a Change My Mind, which is a cool segment they do on CRTV. By the way, check them out, louderwithcrowder.com if you haven't checked them out before. But when they go do a Change My Mind segment, and people are going on Twitter and Facebook and threatening to slash their tires, that is the suppression of free speech. When people online, private individuals, are banding together in these little Antifa-like cells, in these little almost, John Brown Gun Club type groups, and threatening to slash people's tires, and Dallas, or I believe it was an Austin college professor, saying that his car should be firebombed. Where we ourselves, as people, are oppressing the free speech of our fellow citizens because we disagree with them. Answering speech with violence. When you have people on the left chanting that speech is an act of violence. I mean, do we really have to go back to first grade? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Come on, guys. In the UK, they have a problem with the government repressing freedom of speech. In the United States, we have a problem with the private person oppressing freedom of speech, repressing freedom of speech in others. We have lost the notion that the freest speech, the most vulnerable speech, is the speech that offends us, and that is the speech that must be protected the most. If Louder with Crowder offends you, Samantha Bee offends me, I'll never call for her to be silenced. I'll never call for her to be firebombed or for her tires to be slashed. Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm going to poke plenty of fun at her as her political career goes on, because I think she's a whack job. I mean, I think her policies are absolute lunacy, and I'm going to continue to say that. But I would never try to take this woman's platform from her. Nor would I ever encourage violence against her. So in the United States, the threat to the freedom of speech is just as real as it is in the UK, except it is not a governmental oppression. It is oppression by the other 50% of the population. So what do you do with that? Well, in the UK, the UKIP party has become the great attractor, which has drawn YouTube personalities like Sargon of Akkad, like Milo Yiannopoulos, to join their ever-swelling ranks at such a breakneck pace the volunteers can't keep up. So what's the answer here in the United States, where it is absolutely crystal freaking clear that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are willing to take a stand and truly defend the freedom of speech and call for a return of order, a return of civility to the American political discussion? Nobody is holding back their attack dogs anymore. Now it's, let's pump up the volume, let's amp up the pressure. And you know it's going to keep going like this until somebody gets killed. And I don't even know if it's going to stop then. There has to be a uniting voice that calls for the return to civility in American politics, that it is not a crime to hold a difference of opinion, that speech is not an act of violence. Speaking out against a person is not a violent act. My pro-life stance is not an act of violence against a woman. My small government message is not an act of violence against the poor. My rejection of socialism does not mean I am aligned with the top of the 1%. No. We have to reclaim the freedom of speech in the United States, not from our government, but from ourselves. How many people are afraid to have a political discussion in the workplace? You can't anymore because it'll get out of hand. Quickly, too. You know, it used to be you'd look around and see if anybody was looking before you told maybe a joke that wasn't appropriate. I'm not suggesting you should go around telling jokes that aren't appropriate in the workplace. That's a quick way to get fired most places. But now, you look around in the same fashion just to talk about whether or not you agree with the President of the United States. It's a sinful thing now. It's a guilty thing to talk about politics. I mean, which window are you going to close first on your workstation? Are you going to hide YouPorn? Or are you going to hide Politico? Or The Blaze? It's gotten to that point. It's gotten that ugly. Where people are terrified to express themselves politically unless they're in a completely homogenous group that totally matches their opinions. We have to reclaim our churches, our bars, our offices, and get back to a place where civil discussion of the news of the day even can take place. So where is the American UKIP? Where is this place in the middle where we can all meet and discuss things, discuss politics, discuss policy, without the ad hominem attacks? I'm guilty of them too. I've jumped up and said liberal hypocrisy when I pointed out, and people have said conservative hypocrisy when they pointed out, and you know what, we're both right. As what is it? Avenue Q has this song, everybody's racist. Well, everyone's a hypocrite in one form or another. But every now and again, we crawl up from the muck. We hose ourselves off. We put on a shirt. And we act like human beings. And it seems in the past 10 years, we've forgotten how to do that. So I'm going to join my fellow Lanterneers, Stephen and Dylan, and call for a return to civility. Call for a return to normalcy. And the people shouting to the rafters that we cannot allow the Trump administration to be normalized. We can't allow the normalization of this. Be damned. Because it's time for a return to normal. Normal diplomacy. Normal freedom of press. Normal freedom of speech. The freedom of conscience. Agree with me or not politically, we should be able to agree on that, in the very least. Now, turning real quick, climbing down off my soapbox. But, you know, it's a podcast. The whole damn thing's my soapbox anyway. Wanted to take a look here at some local Arizona news from azcentral.com. Excuse me, that little bile comes up in my throat when I reference them. Bit of news here. Yeah, they get that pop-up every time. They want their money. Bit of news here. Representative Paul Mosley recently was stopped for excessive speeding 5 times since the last year. Now, this is going to be a little bit more of a story just for our local Arizonans, but bear with me if you're outside of the Grand Canyon State, because you're going to find this funny. So, a video has been going around here in Arizona. Representative Mosley was pulled over, and he's being criticized for claiming legislative immunity during a traffic stop in March, and he's got a history of speeding without consequence on Arizona roadways, records show. Since February 2017, troopers within the Arizona Department of Public Safety have warned Representative Paul Mosley about excessive speeding on 5 occasions and on a 6th about his failure to heed a stop sign, according to DPS records. Police body cam video released last week shows Mosley, a Republican from Lake Havasu City, telling a La Paz County sheriff that legislative immunity prevents him from getting a speed ticket. The deputy wrote in his report that he had clocked Mosley doing 97 in a 55. Whew! In the video of the March 27 traffic stop, the deputy warned Mosley to watch his speed out of safety. Mosley then told the deputy he was going over 120 earlier, and at times he has driven up to 140. DPS records show instances where troopers stopped him for driving at least 16 miles over the speed limit, and at most in excess of 33 miles over the limit. Troopers didn't indicate whether Mosley claimed legislative immunity, but each let him off with a warning. Mosley has not returned comments, and DPS officials said troopers' reports would stand on their own and declined to comment further. Now, the Arizona Constitution provides legislative immunity, saying lawmakers are privileged from arrest in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of peace. The immunity is not indefinite. The constitutional provision says that lawmakers cannot be subject to civil proceedings while the legislature is in session, or for 15 days before the beginning of each session. Now, the Constitution of Arizona was confirmed, this is not in this story, but in a later story, was confirmed by a spokesperson from the Arizona Department of Public Safety and the Arizona State Prosecutor. Both confirmed that this constitutional provision exists. But slam your brakes, Senator. Watch out, Representative. Governor Doug Ducey has stepped in. As of this morning, Governor Ducey has signed an executive order saying Arizona lawmakers can get speeding tickets. Governor Doug Ducey clarified Friday that legislative immunity does not mean lawmakers can't get speeding tickets. An executive order signed by the governor says officers should consider any criminal violations, including criminal speeding, reckless driving, and driving under the influence, as breach of the peace, and thus subject to citation. It is clear in some recent cases that the peace has been breached, and we have a responsibility to enforce the law in these cases. Oh my gosh. So, the Arizona Constitution is clear, according to Governor Ducey. The practice of not ticketing lawmakers seemingly contradicts advice from House attorneys and outside lawyers who say speeding doesn't likely fall under legislative immunity. Ducey's orders applies to officers employed by the state, but encourages other law enforcement agencies to adopt the same policy. Now, the Arizona Department of Public Safety supplies all of our state troopers who have jurisdiction over the highways, and if you've ever been to Arizona, highway driving is pretty much everything, so time to slow down, Mosley. You might want to learn how to drive 55. So, with that, I just found that entertaining, and I know not everybody located in Arizona will really care about that, but it's funny. We cap off this week, and I want you to think about this. As millennials, we were sold a bill of goods. There's no denying it, and it may be difficult for older generations to understand it. And it may sound like we're just being whiny, entitled jerks, and you know what? A lot of us are. But when you get down to brass tacks, wages have gone up at a crawl, and inflation has jumped up by double in the 32 years that I've been alive. So once we embrace that fact, we can then move forward armed with that knowledge. And the only course that will alleviate this becomes clear. We must reduce the size and scope of our government, reduce government spending, reduce the weight of the heavy foot of the government on the economy, ease restrictions and regulations so that it can flourish. And President Trump seems to be on the right course, at least in this facet of his domestic policy. Is the man without fault? No. Not even remotely. But he seems to be on the right track. So with the mainstream media, believe half of what you hear and none of what you see. But look at what objectively is changing around you. All right, folks. good night. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America. From Phoenix, Arizona, I'm your host, Matt Holloway. This is the Hollownet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Good night.